The collective of dimensional observers had existed for longer than most universes had burned. They were ancient beings made of thought and light, living between the spaces where realities touched. Their purpose was simple. They watched. They recorded. They studied every thinking species across every dimension, their behaviors, their fears, and their courage. In 17,000 realities, they had seen courage take many forms. The crystalline would shatter their own bodies rather than betray the songs of their hive. The gas beings of 9 would scatter themselves into the void of space rather than let invaders capture their young. The iron-shelled would lock their joints and become statues, dying of thirst rather than move from positions they had sworn to hold. All of these were impressive. All of these were recorded and studied and filed away in the great archives, but none of them had ever made senior archivist La's membranes tremble. She stood before the grand assembly now, her form flickering with colors that her species used to show emotion. She had not flickered like this in 3,000 cycles. The other observers noticed. They grew quiet and still, sensing that something unusual was about to happen. "I have found an anomaly," La announced. Her voice echoed through the chamber like wind through a canyon. "Species 7291C, they call themselves humanity." The assembly shifted. Anomalies were rare. Anomalies disrupted their perfect models and forced them to reconsider things they thought they understood. Some observers welcomed anomalies, most feared them. La activated the first projection. The chamber filled with the image of a mountain pass, narrow and steep, with snow blowing sideways through the air. In the pass stood 300 warriors wearing red cloaks, their faces hard and their spears ready. Before them stretched an army so vast it looked like a dark ocean flooding the land. "This is a place called Thermopylae," La said. "It existed on their world approximately 2,500 of their years ago. These 300 warriors stood against an army of over 100,000. They knew they would die. Every single one of them understood this with complete certainty before the battle began." A junior observer raised one of its many tendrils. Perhaps they lacked the intelligence to understand their situation. Many primitive species cannot comprehend large numbers or calculate odds. "No," La's voice became sharp. "They understood perfectly. They wrote poems about their coming deaths beforehand. They sent messengers home carrying final words for their families. One of them, when told that the enemy had so many archers that their arrows would block out the sun, responded that this was good news because then they would fight in the shade." The assembly was silent. "He made a joke," La continued. "They all made jokes. They laughed about dying. They competed with each other to see who could appear most calm about their certain death. And when the time came, they stood in that pass for 3 days. They killed thousands before they fell. And when their spears broke, they fought with swords. When their swords broke, they fought with their hands and teeth." She let the image fade. "This is impressive," said one of the elder observers. "But we have seen such things before. They did similar things in their war against the Mind-Eaters." "They did what their biology demanded," La replied. "Their joint lock reflex is automatic. They cannot choose to flee even if they wish to, but these humans had no such limitations. They could have run, they could have surrendered, they could have negotiated. Every option was available to them." She paused. "They chose to stay and die." Another projection appeared. A different time, a different place. A fortress in a desert, surrounded by thousands of enemies. Inside, fewer than 200 defenders held their ground. "The Alamo," La said. "They held for 13 days against an army 20 times their size. They knew no help was coming. They stayed anyway." The image changed again. A frozen city under siege, buildings reduced to rubble, people starving in the streets. Leningrad. For almost 900 days, these humans refused to surrender their city. Over 1 million of them died. They ate sawdust and leather. They burned their furniture for warmth. They kept fighting. Another image. A bridge, narrow and made of wood, with a single soldier standing on it. He was wounded badly, his uniform soaked with blood. This one man held a bridge against an entire army while his companions escaped behind him. When the bridge was finally cut down, he fell into the river still fighting. The projections kept coming. A hill in a distant jungle, a beach at dawn, a schoolroom where teachers covered children with their bodies as bullets tore through the walls, a cockpit where a wounded pilot aimed his burning aircraft at an enemy ship, a hospital where doctors refused to leave their patients even as bombs fell around them. This behavior repeats, La said, across their entire history, across every culture, every era, every continent of their world. When escape becomes impossible and death becomes certain, something in humans changes. Something activates. What activates? Asked an observer from the far dimensions. That is what we must discover. La dimmed the projections and faced the assembly directly. In all our studies, across all our realities, we have never encountered a species that behaves this way so consistently. Other species have individuals who show great courage. Humans appear to have built their entire civilization on a foundation of beings willing to die for things they will never see completed. She brought up one final image. It showed a human skeleton, ancient and fragile, found in the ruins of a buried city. The skeleton's arms were wrapped around two smaller skeletons, children, and the position made it clear that even in the final moments, this human had tried to shield them from whatever was coming. This one died protecting children who were not even related to her, La said. We checked the genetic records. She was a stranger to them. She simply saw them in danger and put herself between them and death. The assembly murmured with confusion and wonder. We have a name for what they do, La continued. We call it hive loyalty. We have a name for what they do. We call it genetic preservation. We have a name for what they do. We call it biological compulsion. But we have no name for what humans do. Our models cannot explain it. Our categories cannot contain it. She let silence fill the chamber for a long moment. I propose a full study. We will send observers to their dimension. We will examine their history, their biology, their psychology. We will watch their last stands across all of time and try to understand how a species can look at oblivion and choose to meet it standing rather than running. The vote was quick. No observer opposed the study. They were all too curious, too disturbed, too fascinated by what they had seen. As the assembly dispersed, one of the elder observers approached La privately. It was old beyond measuring, a being that had watched stars die and galaxies collapse. You showed us their courage, it said, but you did not show us their fear. Do they not feel it? La's membranes flickered with a color none had seen from her before. It took a moment for the elder to recognize it. The color meant admiration. They feel it, she answered. That is what makes them so remarkable. They feel every drop of it. Their bodies scream at them to run. Their minds show them exactly how they will die. They see the numbers, they understand the mathematics of their doom, and they feel terror so deep it makes their hands shake. She paused. And then they pick up their weapons anyway. They kiss pictures of their families, they say prayers to whatever gods they believe in, and they walk forward into death with their eyes open. The elder was silent for a long time. How, it finally asked, how is that possible? La turned away, her form already fatting as she prepared to travel to Earth's dimension. That is exactly what we are going to find out. Observer Third Class had never questioned an assignment before. In 700 cycles of service to the collective, they had studied 63 species across 12 dimensions, behaviors and recording data with perfect precision. They had watched the death dances of the spiral moths, the birth wars of the stone singers, and the strange mating rituals of the void swimmers. None of it had disturbed them. The humans disturbed them. For 40 cycles now had been immersed in human records. They had accessed testimonies, historical documents, neural pattern reconstructions, and biological data. They had watched thousands of last stands from every angle, measuring hormone levels and brain activity and muscle tension. They had built models and run simulations and tested hypotheses. None of it made sense. They stood now in La's private study, their form flickering with the colors of confusion and something close to distress. The senior archivist watched them patiently, waiting for the report. "The readings are impossible," finally said. "I have checked them 17 times. I have used different instruments and different methods. The results are always the same." "Tell me." Activated a display showing a human brain during the final moments of a last stand. Colors pulsed through it, representing different types of activity. "This is the fear response," they said, pointing to a region that burned bright red. "When humans enter these scenarios, their fear increases, not decreases, increases. Their bodies flood with chemicals designed to make them run. Their hearts beat faster. Their muscles prepare for flight. Every biological system screams at them to escape. And yet they stay. They stay." His voice was troubled. "They override everything. Their conscious minds somehow push down the survival instinct and force their bodies to do the opposite of what biology demands. We have seen this in other species, but only in small amounts, and only when other instincts are stronger. When a mother protects her children, for example, the protection instinct overpowers the fear. But these humans are not always protecting family. No, that is the problem. I studied a case from their recent history. A human soldier alone, covering his unit's retreat across a bridge. He had no genetic relationship to any of them. Some he had only known for a few weeks. But when the enemy came, he stayed behind. Brought up the reconstruction, and suddenly La's study filled with the image of a young human male crouched behind broken stones, a weapon in his hands, blood already seeping through his uniform. "He was shot 11 times, said quietly. 11 separate wounds over the course of 1 hour. After the 3rd wound, his blood loss should have made him unconscious. After the 5th, he should have been unable to move. After the 7th, he should have been dead." They watched the human keep firing, keep moving, keep dragging himself to new positions even as his body failed piece by piece. He held that bridge for 63 minutes. When they finally recovered his body, they found that he had killed 32 enemy soldiers. His unit escaped because of him. Over 100 humans lived because this one chose to die slowly and painfully in their place. The reconstruction showed the final moments. The human slumped against a wall, his weapon empty, his eyes dimming. And there, in the neural patterns that had reconstructed from biological traces, something strange appeared. "This is what I cannot explain," said, pointing to a cluster of activity in the human's brain. "This region activated in his final seconds. We have no equivalent to it. It seems to generate something that is not quite emotion and not quite thought. The closest translation I can find is meaning, purpose, something that outweighs survival itself." La studied the patterns carefully. What was he feeling? His form flickered with something like shame. That is the most disturbing part. He was not feeling anger or hatred or even determination. He was feeling grateful. 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 His last recorded thought, as best as I can reconstruct it, was thankfulness that he had been able to buy enough time. He was dying, alone, in pain, thousands of miles from his family, and he felt grateful for the opportunity. His voice dropped. He considered it an honor to die that way. La was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Continue your research. I want you to focus on the survivors, the ones who lived because others chose not to." Did as instructed. Over the next 20 cycles, they studied the humans who had been saved by last stands. They expected to find guilt, trauma, and sadness. They found those things, certainly, but they found something else too. They found the survivors carrying the dead with them forever. Not as burdens, not as sources of pain, but as fires that could never go out. Watched a human woman speak about a soldier who had died protecting her village 60 years earlier. She had been a child then. Now she was old, her hair white and her hands trembling. But when she spoke that soldier's name, her eyes burned with a light that time could not dim. "He saved us," she said simply. "I have tried every day since to be worthy of that." Watched a human man teach his children about a firefighter who had died rescuing strangers from a burning building. The man had never met this firefighter, but he spoke the name like a prayer, and his children listened like they were hearing something sacred. "This is what heroes do," the man said. "They show us what we could be, what we should try to be." Watched monuments being built and ceremonies being held. They watched names being carved into stone and stories being passed from generation to generation. The humans did not let their dead disappear. They kept them alive through memory, through ritual, through the simple act of speaking their names aloud. And something remarkable happened because of this. The courage of the fallen did not die with them. It spread. It infected others. Young humans heard the stories and felt something kindle inside them, and when their own moments came, when they faced their own impossible odds, they remembered those who had stood before them. They became capable of the same sacrifice. Presented these findings to La with trembling membranes. "Courage is contagious among this species," they said. "The last stands do not end when the defenders fall. They echo forward through time, changing everyone they touch. A single act of sacrifice can inspire hundreds of future acts. The math is extraordinary. One human dying bravely can eventually produce thousands of humans willing to die bravely." La absorbed this information in silence. "There is more," continued. "They do not only remember the famous last stands, they remember all of them. A mother who died protecting her children, a teacher who shielded her students, a stranger who jumped into a river to save a drowning child and did not come back up. Every sacrifice, no matter how small, is treated as sacred." Why? Because they understand something we have missed. Courage is not about winning. It is not about survival. It is about showing others what is possible. His voice was filled with wonder. When a human chooses to die rather than abandon others, they are not just saving those people. They are planting a seed. They are proving that such choices can be made. And every human who witnesses that proof, or even hears about it generations later, becomes a little more capable of making the same choice. Brought up one final image. It showed a human child, no more than 8 years old, standing in front of a memorial wall covered with names. The child's hand was pressed against the stone, touching a name, and their face was filled with determination that seemed far too large for such a small body. "I asked this child what they were thinking," said. "They told me they were making a promise. They were promising to be brave when their time came. They were promising to be worthy of the names on the wall." La looked at the image for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with emotion that observers rarely displayed. "They have turned death into immortality," she said. "They have found a way to make sacrifice meaningful beyond the moment of sacrifice. The fallen do not disappear. They become part of everyone who comes after." "Yes," agreed. "And that is why they can face last stands without breaking. They know that even if they die, they will not truly end. They will become part of the story. They will become fuel for future courage. They will echo through time forever." The two observers stood in silence, surrounded by images of human sacrifice and human memory, understanding at last what made this species so remarkable. The humans were not unbreakable because they did not fear death. They were unbreakable because they had found something stronger than death. They had found meaning. The Grand Assembly reconvened after 100 cycles of study. Observers had come from across dimensional boundaries, some traveling distances that would take light 1,000,000 years to cross. They filled the chamber with forms of every shape and color, beings of crystal and gas and pure thought, all focused on the platform where La stood with her final report. The images behind her showed humanity's last stands across all of history: ancient warriors and modern soldiers, defenders of cities and protectors of single rooms, famous names that echoed through human memory and forgotten ones known only to those they had saved. In each image, the same impossible thing happened. Beings who should have fled chose instead to become walls. Let the assembly study the images in silence. She wanted them to see what she had seen. She wanted them to feel the weight of what she was about to say. "We have completed our study," she announced finally, "and we have reached conclusions that will require us to create new categories in our archives." The assembly grew still. Humans are not remarkable in most measurable ways. They are not the strongest species we have. They can shatter mountains with their fists. Humans cannot. They are not the fastest. The Wind Riders can cross continents in moments. Humans are slow, limited to the speed of their soft bodies. They are not the most intelligent. The mind collective of Dimension 12 contains more processing power in a single node than humanity's entire civilization. She paused. They are fragile. Their bodies break easily. They live short lives, rarely more than 100 of their years. They fight among themselves constantly. They make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. By every measure we normally use, they should be a minor species, barely worth noting in our archives. The images behind her changed. Now they showed humans at their worst moments: wars, cruelty, destruction. And yet, La's voice dropped, becoming soft and serious. And yet we have determined that humanity represents the single greatest concentration of what we can only call unbreakable courage in any reality we have ever observed. The images shifted again. A soldier throwing himself onto a grenade to save his companions. A doctor staying with patients during a plague that would surely kill her. A pilot aiming his damaged aircraft at an enemy ship because it was the only weapon he had left. A mother stepping between her children and a threat she could not possibly defeat. "We have studied courage for 17,000 realities," La continued. "We have every form it takes: hive loyalty in the genetic preservation, in the territorial instinct, in the religious devotion, in the crystal mines. Each type follows predictable patterns. Each can be modeled and explained." She dimmed the images. Human courage cannot be modeled. It cannot be predicted. It appears without warning in beings who showed no previous signs of exceptional bravery. A clerk becomes a warrior. A child becomes a shield. A coward becomes a hero in the span of a single heartbeat. The assembly murmured with confusion. "We analyzed the biological triggers," La explained. "We expected to find some override, some circuit that switches off fear when death becomes certain. We found the opposite. Human fear increases in last-stand scenarios. Their bodies produce more stress chemicals, not less. Every biological system screams at them to run." She displayed neural patterns across the chamber. But then something else activates, a region of their minds that we have no equivalent to. It seems to perform a calculation that makes no logical sense. It weighs their individual survival against abstract concepts like duty, honor, love, and meaning. And somehow, impossibly, those abstract concepts win. An elder observer spoke from the back of the chamber. "How can abstractions outweigh survival? Survival is the foundation of all biological imperatives." "That is exactly what makes humans an anomaly," La replied. "They have developed the ability to care about things more than they care about living. They can decide that their death has value if it serves something they believe in, and once they make that decision, nothing can unmake it." She brought up the testimony of a human survivor, a young woman who had been saved when her father stayed behind to hold a door against attackers. "We asked this woman how her father found the courage to do what he did. She said something that we have been trying to understand for 50 cycles." La's voice was quiet. "She said he did not find courage. She said courage found him, the moment he decided that his daughter's life mattered more than his own." The assembly was silent. Humans do not become brave through training or genetics or biological imperatives. They become brave through love, through connection, through deciding that other lives, other futures, other possibilities matter enough to die for. Let this sink in before continuing. And here is the most remarkable part. When a human makes this choice and dies for others, they do not simply disappear. They become part of every human who learns their story. Their courage spreads like fire, moving through generations, inspiring new acts of sacrifice. We calculated the cascading effect of a single last stand across human history. The numbers are staggering. One human dying bravely can produce ripples that affect thousands of future decisions. She displayed a web of connections spreading out from a single point, showing how one soldier's sacrifice in an ancient battle had inspired poems, stories, traditions, and eventually other soldiers who made the same choice thousands of years later. They have discovered how to make courage immortal, La said. They remember their dead. They speak their names. They tell their stories to children who will tell them to their own children. The fallen become part of the living, and the living become capable of becoming the fallen. The assembly stirred with something like wonder. "What is your recommendation?" asked the eldest observer, a being so old it had watched the first stars ignite. La straightened her form and spoke with absolute certainty. "My recommendation is that we classify Earth's dimension as protected, not for humanity's sake. They require no protection we could offer, but for the sake of any species foolish enough to threaten them." She activated a final image. It showed a human soldier standing on a bridge, alone, wounded beyond any reasonable capacity to remain standing. Enemies swarmed toward him from both sides. He had no chance, no possibility of survival, no hope of victory. He was smiling. "Because any enemy who backs humanity into a corner," La said, "will discover what we have spent 100 cycles learning. There is no force in any dimension that can make a human surrender when they have decided not to. They will keep fighting past exhaustion, past injury, past the point where their bodies should have failed." The image zoomed in on the soldier's face. His eyes were calm, peaceful, certain. "And when they finally fall, they will fall forward. They will fall reaching for their enemies' throats. They will fall still trying to buy one more second for the people behind them. They will fall and their stories will be told, and new humans will rise up inspired by their sacrifice." Let the image fade to darkness. We have studied courage across 17,000 realities. We have seen species fight and die in every way imaginable, but we have never seen anything like this. We have never encountered a species that can generate courage from nothing but the decision to be courageous. That can transform certain death into meaningful sacrifice. That can make their last moments into seeds that will grow into forests of future bravery. She faced the assembly directly. "Humans are not the strongest. They are not the fastest. They are not the... But when the moment comes when everything is lost and death is certain and any sane being would run, they become something that we do not have a word for. Something beyond brave. Something beyond stubborn. Something that looks at oblivion and says no." The vote was taken. It was unanimous. Earth's dimension received protected status, marked with the highest warnings the collective could assign. And in the archives of dimensional observers, a new category was created. It had never been needed before. The archivists had to invent new terminology just to describe what they had found. The category was labeled Courage Beyond Parameters. For 100,000 cycles, it contained a single entry. The entry read as follows: Species 7291C Self-Designation, Humanity, Home Dimension, Earth Prime. Classification, Protected, Warning Level, Maximum. Notes: this species demonstrates courage that cannot be modeled, predicted, or explained by any known framework. They are capable of overriding all survival instincts through pure will. They transform sacrifice into immortality through memory and story. Individual acts of bravery create cascading effects across generations. Threat assessment: do not engage in scenarios that could create last-stand situations. Humans cornered are significantly more dangerous than humans with escape routes. No defensive line will break them. No superior numbers will discourage them. No certainty of death will stop them. Final recommendation: approach with respect. Do not corner. If conflict becomes unavoidable, allow them to retreat. If retreat is blocked, expect losses beyond all rational calculation. They are only human. That is precisely what makes them dangerous. The assembly dispersed. The observers returned to their dimensions. The archives were sealed. But sometimes, across the vast distances between realities, beings would gather and share stories. And when they spoke of courage, when they tried to explain what bravery really meant, they would speak of one species. Not the strongest, not the fastest, not the... just a small blue world filled with fragile beings who had learned how to die standing up. The humans.